Pregnant pause. Good morning, everyone. How are you?
Fantastic.
We are here. The 2025 National Landcare Conference began yesterday, and now we're diving in with 650 of you here from all around the country. Can I hear a little bit of noise? This is a room. This is a wonderful room, and we started just now with that brilliant film, that brilliant little documentary about the Bangarang Aboriginal Corporation and the Warby Rangers Landcare Group. And if you notice before that, as you were walking in, there was a whole lot of photos sent in as part of National Landcare Week. And that was an idea to say, send us the images, send us Landcare through your lens. So keep an eye on those for the rest of the conference, and you'll see you, and you'll see your groups, you'll see your people. And that's what we talked about last night at the very first Landcare Film Festival. And what a great event that was, because it was doing exactly what we saw on the screen just then. Tell stories through the screen, through the eyes of you as the land carers out there on country doing what you do. I want to say a big thanks, and Max will be up in a moment, but Max and Clinton for kicking us off there with the welcome and the smoking ceremony. I want to give a particularly large thanks to everyone who turned up yesterday for the two events that we had. We had the Next Gen Landcare Summit, beautifully hosted by Lindsay Davies and a host of other hosts, which is part of what the Next Gen is all about. Hosting the youth into Landcare, showcasing what they're doing, bringing them into the spotlight. And it was a fantastic day, and there was more than 200 people in the room here. And while that was taking place, we also had the First Nations Landcare gathering at Guanaba. And for anyone that was at that, and for anyone who walked in the creek and stood in the waters and settled on country and listened and were present for the yarn, you'll know what I mean. And that's a wonderful reflection of ideas that were sown at the last conference in 2022. Can I ask to stand up who was at the conference, the National Landcare Conference in 2022? Can you stand up? Wow, that's fantastic. So there's a lot of people that haven't been. Who's at a Landcare conference for the first time? National Landcare Conference. Stand up. Can we have a round of applause for all our... Wow. Now, can everyone from Southeast Queensland and Queensland stand up, because we want to give a big thank you to all of you for hosting us. It's wonderful to be in this part of the country and move into day 2 of our conference. I want to give a big welcome and thank you to all the speakers, for those who spoke yesterday, but to all of you who will be presenting your projects and your activities over the days ahead, to all the Landcare volunteers and supporters, and of course to the Landcare Award finalists who we will be celebrating tomorrow in this very room, which I'm really looking forward to. And of course, there's all our sponsors. Now, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Doug Human, the Chair of Landcare Australia, and the board directors, to the National Landcare Network and the Landcare State and Territory organisations. And we're here on the Gold Coast, and a big warm welcome and thanks to the acting Mayor of the City of Gold Coast, Mark Hamill, who's over here. Thank you, Mark. Now, an event like this doesn't happen without a massive effort, and I need to recognise the National Landcare Conference sponsors, the Australian Government, including the team from DAF and DQ. Okay, there we are, 3 minutes in and I've messed the first acronym up. If you don't have a good acronym, you've got to rename. Okay, DQ. And the future, see, everyone's going to remember DQ now. They slipped me a 50 to say that. The Future Drought Fund, the Victorian Government, the City of Gold Coast, Queensland Water and Landcarers, Bupa, Rabobank, Powerlink Queensland, ACM, Agri, and of course the community supporters. Thanks to all of you, the conference delegates. You've made an incredible effort. I said this yesterday at the Next Gen gathering. You've made time. You've crafted space. And the organising committee have created this space for you to come and for us to share. Fill the space with your conversations, but also leave space to absorb, renew, regenerate, rethink what you do, how you do it, be inspired, be moved, be challenged. This is the void that the wonderful team have created so that you can be here to be inspired. Now, a few little house notes. These are those good things that you have to go through. Gold Coast Convention and Exhibition Centre is a non-smoking building. Designated smoking areas are located out on the external terrace where we had the smoking ceremony. Restroom facilities are in the foyer over there. The exit doors, you'll find them. And just look at that little sign. You have to... And then just run, okay? And same if you need to go to the loo. Clench and run. So that's over there. I love this one, emergency alert tone. Lindsay, you did a good tone. So the emergency tone is beep, 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 beep. Stop what you're doing. It says wait for further instructions. Just get the hell out of here. Out to the terrace and just don't get hit by the tram as you run for the beach. The emergency evacuation tone is whoop, whoop, whoop. I like this, remain calm and evacuate. I said evacuate, don't evacuate. That may come after if you're that scared. Assembly areas located across the road in front of the Star if you can dodge the cars and the tram. Now, these little dudes here are the Landcare pups, Banksia and Wattle. They are going to go to a lucky home. This was a little idea to stir up some inspiration ahead of the conference. So watch this space. There'll be an announcement about where they may pop up and someone's going to win one of the pups. Big thank you to all the volunteers. Of course, make the most of our exhibition out the back, and big thanks to all the exhibitors for taking the time to get involved and be here. A wonderful thanks to Auntie Kilya, to the photographers and Vox Pop interviewers. At different points you may be asked to come along and share your thoughts, so please do that because it is life. Landcare is for everyone and we need to hear your voice and your voices. The Landcare Australia team will be on their stall. If you've got any questions, go up there and ask them. And of course, we're in a social world. Please share images, share photos, share little videos, share quotes, take notes, share them so people can see that there are 650 people here for good reason. And when you multiply 650 people by the people that we know, we can influence tens of thousands of people over the next couple of days. Now, I'd like to welcome Max Dillon, who was outside there earlier with the smoking. And Max is a Kupe, Giramun, Galeen, Combamberry, Nunakul, man of the Combamberry, Ngunnawal people, Narangawal people of the Gold Coast. Max, thank you, and over to you.
No sound? How's that? Wanting to wish everybody a good day here. Now, Kurpe Giramun Galeen Kumari Nunakul. Born in Southport, my children born in Southport, my mother born in Southport, my grandfather, my great-grandmother, and so on, my great-great-grandma, she born on the banks of the Narang River. Been here a long time. My grandmother's Dunnage, Quandamuka, Nunakul woman. Now, I wanted to tell you a little bit about our history here, our boundary. We've been here dated at 21,000 years. It's a long time we've been dated. So our boundaries given by Gindan Galeen up on Beachmont. He took a white answer back in the day. It was the first recording of our boundaries. And he told Gindan Galeen, Billy Galeen, also known as Billy Galeen, he said that our boundaries go from the Coomera River almost away from the Tweed River to the foothills of the mountains, Gumai, Bareen, Tamborine, foothills of the mountains in the west, all along the coastline. We've got a beautiful saltwater country with a plethora of food here, and smorgasbord, buffet, periwinkles and cockle shells and swamp wallabies and all types of bird life and fish, heaps of fish, crab, kadingra, oysters, everything. But the first thing that was eaten on country here, the very first thing that it was enjoyed wasn't from the smorgasbord of the sea, it was the nectar of the gods, the little native sugarbag bee. The honey, the sugar bag was the first thing enjoyed here on country. So that's where, for me, the indigenous seasons start with the little native bee, and it was Jabreen, the Dreamtime giant, who created everything here, that feasted on the wild sugar bag honey before he rested, and the mountain enshrouded him, our sacred site. So that's the nectar of the gods. And I was had the pleasure of welcoming some of our people here. I was invited to do the welcome, and I met some very lovely people, and I see a lot more people here today, a lot more. I think some of you are out with my mod in our Indigenous protected area with cousin Justine, and we've got a beautiful site out there. But yesterday I took off to, after doing the welcome and meeting everyone here and welcoming in, I took off to Gelurgal, which is the Burleigh Headlands. It's the most visited national park in Queensland. It's probably the most underfunded. 1.4 million visitors, a lot of heavy foot traffic. So I was there yesterday cleaning up a lot of rubbish, and it gets very dirty. A lot of drugs up there, and beer bottles, smashed glass, tampons, nappies, wipes, tissues. I thought I might even get a little bit sick because I was picking up a lot of rubbish, just chucking in my backpack. And but we was up there to plan out some re-veg, and as we was planning out the re-veg, I was picking up as much as I could and making the site as beautiful as I could, because I like people to enjoy the sacred. The sacred's important, very, very important. And maintaining the sacred. It's part of caring for country, caring for land. And the core values of who we are is conservation and treading lightly as possible. And living in the best of both worlds. We live in a modern world now, so we try to live in the best of both worlds. And respect to the old people for the way they lived and showing us how to look after and care for country. And we'll try to share and integrate. All of you's got that knowledge, and he's interweaving it in your pathways as you're meeting people and Indigenous perspectives and how to care for country wherever you are. That's important. So I'd like to once again just welcome everybody here and be guided by Jabreen. The Jabreen be with you in your walk and your stay here, and Mumble Barani, the great spirit in the sky, the architect, great spirit in the sky, also be with you. And thank you very much for having me. Yana Jimbalang. Goodbye for now, friend.
Thank you, Max, for yesterday and today. Oh, don't walk in front of the speakers, numpty. I just want to share one quote before I introduce the acting mayor, and it came from last night's film festival, and it really resonated. And that film festival is something that really struck a note, and it was an idea that came from the organising committee where Barry from Melbourne Water, it was like, what can we do? He's done films, he's done this, and then Mel and the team came up with the idea, let's just add to the conference organisation list and have a film festival, which was incredibly successful, a full cinema there last night. But there was a quote from one of the Narrap Rangers, Cass, "Every day I spend healing country, I feel more complete as a person." I should introduce the mayor from the dais, the acting mayor. Could you please welcome to the conference, everyone, the acting mayor of the City of Gold Coast, Mark Hamill. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, mate. Jeez, for a little guy, you jump up on the stage easy then. Bloody just bounced up on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, it is my honour on behalf of Mayor Tom Tate and the entire elected wing of the City of Gold Coast to officially welcome you to the beautiful Gold Coast and the 2025 National Landcare Conference. Can I acknowledge my colleague, Councillor Glenn Tozer, Chair of our Lifestyle, Environment Heritage Committee, and also an incredibly proud councillor for a very large portion of our city's hinterland. Could I also acknowledge all of the City of Gold Coast staff who are here today? We are truly blessed in this city to have some of the most professional and passionate city officers as key stakeholders in our city's bold environmental vision. And I really must take the opportunity, because she will kill me later on, to particularly call out Soraya Robertson, who is just down the front here, who I'm sure over the next couple of days, all of you will meet, and once you meet her, you will understand why she is a truly treasured and loved city officer, and well known and loved by any group in the city in the environmental space. Now, I mentioned Acosta briefly at the start that I was watching Gardening Australia Junior with my 4-year-old yesterday and said, I'm meeting him tomorrow, and my 4-year-old refused to believe me, so I have a photo to prove that I met Costa. What I didn't tell Costa was my 4-year-old said, Daddy, can you ask what grows in Costa's beard? So, mate, I'll see how I go, but we've got that there. Folks, I come from one of the oldest European families in the city, and I acknowledge and thank you for the welcome to the country beforehand, but my family have lived on the same block of land in the very north part of the city since 1860. We're still very privileged to own that original block of land, to still farm it and live in it. We're surrounded by the Logan River, by Ramsar wetlands, and by critical koala habitat. It's a very different part of the Gold Coast, and I hope for anyone in the room who hasn't visited the Gold Coast before this conference, so that's something you're going to learn, that the perception of the Gold Coast is all about this very shiny glitter strip in our beaches, but the Gold Coast truly is a lot more than that, and to locals from the very north to the very south, and especially in the west of the city blessed by the hinterland, it truly is a magical environment to grow up in, and a magical environment to grow kids up in, which is something I'm really proud of, to see my children in this city out planting trees, out pulling weeds out in conservation areas, connecting with earth and connecting with country. The City of Gold Coast is proud to sponsor the Landcare Conference and partner with Landcare Australia to foster ideas, exchange knowledge, and listen to the stories of others. The coast, for all its built form infrastructure, is one of Australia's most biodiverse cities, with a unique mix of World Heritage rainforests, pristine beaches, hinterland, and urban conservation areas. Hosting the conference gives us the opportunity to highlight our unique natural environment, as well as collaborative efforts of the city, industry, landholders and passionate volunteers. Every year, tens of thousands of community members actively support the thriving Landcare and environmental movement on the Gold Coast through various initiatives, including land restoration, environmental education and citizen science. The city proudly supports Landcare through programs like Naturally GC, which builds volunteer partnerships for land restoration, along with private land conservation efforts through the Nature Conservation Assistance Program. We also lead one of the nation's largest ecological restorations programs and acquire land to safeguard critical habitats. I am proud to be part of a council who just in the last 5 years, but over the last 15 years, has invested tens of millions of dollars of ratepayer funds to acquire land, to rehabilitate land, to bring that land back for future generations. These efforts align closely with our natural city strategy and our goal to achieve 51% vegetation cover. As a sponsor, I have learned to keep my speech to the agreed time limit, as I know that you are all here to listen to some truly inspirational keynote speakers. So for me, that's enough for now. I truly look forward to tomorrow night to being here as we announce some magnificent award recipients for next year. I look forward to hearing some very interesting speeches over the next couple of days, visiting the exhibit at the back, and most of all, just getting to meet you all and hopefully shake all of your hands and to thank you sincerely on behalf of our city for what you do at all of your cities to help our country continue to move forward and make sure that our environment gets the attention it truly deserves. Have a great conference. Welcome to the Gold Coast.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you.
Some of you who were at the film festival last night would have heard me mention that I caught the tram from Broady to Broady. It was one stop. First time I've been on a tram. I thought, I kind of was told by reception, you just pay on the tram, but you don't, you pay at the station. So I travelled for free. But can I just give you the 50 cents that I should have paid? Because the thing is, I was videoing it. It was a live broadcast, so if there's any sirens and I get taken away or I don't turn up for my next hosting bit, it's only because I've been locked up by the Queensland government for jipping them 50 cents for my trip. It gives me great pleasure now to welcome Doug Human AM, the Chair of Landcare Australia, who will be introducing our keynote speakers for now. So can you please welcome Doug? No worries.
Thank you, Costa, and it's so fantastic to have your energy in the room again and demonstrating your athletic capacity. I would have loved to have done that. It's a real thrill and honour to be able to welcome you all and introduce the conference to you. Thank you. As has been mentioned, the energy is already in the room from yesterday and from the activity we had yesterday. I'll mention that a little more in a moment. I'm not sure if Max and Clinton are still in the room, but I really want to acknowledge their welcome, their smoking ceremony, and the telling of some of their stories, others of which we heard yesterday. Yesterday's First Nations Landcare gathering at Guanaba was truly a special day, and we spent the day with Max's cousin, Justine. It really, I thought, set the tone and the bar for this conference, as this morning's welcome has as well, because it reminds us of the depth of knowledge, connection and culture, all words which were used yesterday and today, that comes from caring for country, for tens of thousands of years by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people. Thank you to all of the participants of that day yesterday and to the leadership that was shown there and your willingness to share your knowledge and culture with conference delegates. I know we'll be taking those messages not only into this room, but to the rooms of ministers and departments in Canberra. On behalf of Landcare Australia and this room, I acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of the land that we live and work on. We do value and respect your deep and continued spiritual and cultural connection to the lands, waters and seas, and pay our respects to ancestors and elders past and present, especially to those of you in the room. We welcome you. Thank you. I want to especially acknowledge the members of the First Nations Landcare Working Group who gave so much of their time and energy to help, and do give their time and energy to help Landcare integrate First Nations perspectives into the work we do every day. As Costa said, the genesis of the amount of energy that is being put into First Nations connections came from the 2022 conference and has grown significantly since, and yesterday's day was a demonstration of that. Mark, thank you for your welcome to the Gold Coast, and thank you to your council and staff, one of whom, Naomi, is one of your staff and is one of the directors of Landcare Australia and a founder of Intrepid Landcare. So I warmly welcome all of you from all corners of Australia, every state and territory. I've already seen familiar faces. I've already forgotten names. I am sorry. It is so good to see so many old faces, and I think a majority of new faces from glancing around the room as we were asked to identify when we had last come. I do encourage you all to speak with me, to speak with the Landcare Australia staff, which are very visible in their black t-shirts, but also to Landcare Australia board members. This event would not be possible without our generous sponsors and partners, and I want you to know who they are. And rather than using the acronym, I acknowledge the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water. That's the Q. I acknowledge the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, and we'll hear from both those ministers tomorrow. I acknowledge the City of Gold Coast. I also acknowledge our conference sponsors, the Victorian Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action, the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry's Future Drought Fund. That got a lot of airplay yesterday in the First Nations meeting. More on that in the course of the conference as well. I acknowledge Bupa, Rabobank, Powerlink Queensland, Australian Community Media, Greyhound Australia, Four Pines Brewing Company and Queensland Water and Land Carers, and our community sponsors. What an interesting assortment of corporate partners with whom we're doing business in restoration and caring for country. Your support is vital. Corporate sponsorship and partnerships and the volunteers and people they bring into our movement is making this the largest knowledge sharing and networking event for environmental and agricultural communities in Australia. It is the biggest thing in the country for our sector. I welcome our friends and partners, the National Landcare Network, the state and territory Landcare organisations, and all the Landcare groups and individuals with whom we work on a week-to-week basis, and with whom we are at Landcare Australia committed to deepen and strengthen collaborations for the benefit of land carers on the ground. That's the 650 of you. Welcome particularly to the first-time delegates. I'm just blown away by the fact that probably more than 300 of you, maybe 400 of you, are first-timers. You won't forget this conference. The last one was unforgettable. This has already taken it to another level from what we saw yesterday, and I hope that vibe comes through really, really earlier. The work of the Landcare community has never been more critical. The need to come together and collaborate, never greater. The theme for this year's conference is Landcare, nature, agriculture, land and people positive. Landcare is fundamentally about connection, people to place, communities to culture, and generations to each other. Last year marked 35 years of Landcare Australia and the Landcare movement as a national movement. The vision of all Australians actively caring for the land and water that sustains us, that sparked Landcare's beginnings, remain just as relevant today as they did 35 years ago. Sadly, the challenges we face are also greater than ever. Biodiversity loss, climate change, impacts of invasive species, extreme weather events, landscape degradation, food and energy security, not to mention the daily occurrences and confusions that affect us each, differently and individually. Yet, even with all these obstacles, I am hopeful, and I'm reminded of a remark by a climate scientist that hope is not a feeling, it's a strategy. Yesterday, Next Gen Landcare Summit brought together nearly 200 young people. They're full of fresh ideas, of energy and passion, and they provide hope. Their willingness to embrace technology, science and collaboration is exactly what we need to ensure a resilient and sustainable future. And when we bring together all those parts I've just been describing, Landcare volunteers and groups, young people, First Nations people, farmers and the agricultural sector, landholders, Landcare facilitators, natural resource management professionals, community groups, scientists, we are stronger and more innovative and more capable of creating positive change. This conference is about more than listening. It's about sharing, learning, and being inspired, and then taking what you learn back to your own communities to put learning into action. Over the next 2 days, you'll hear from more than 80 presenters across 5 streams, from climate adaptation and nature repair to technology and innovation, sustainable agriculture and biodiversity restoration. All this is a demonstration that together we have the knowledge, the networks and the drive to create lasting change. But our future depends on working side by side to ensure the health of nature, sustainable and productive agricultural lands, the well-being of people and their connection to place, and the resilience of communities that we live and work in every day. So let's embrace the opportunity of the next few days, share ideas, inspire one another, and connect across regions, sectors, and generations. If we do that, the legacy of Landcare is in good hands. I'd now like to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Fiona Simson, Oceania Representative and Vice President of the World Farmers Organisation. Fiona will be known to you as she is to me, listening to her on Radio Breakfast and hearing her articulate, compelling, proud and passionate voice for rural and regional interests particularly, and especially most recently as chair of the National Farmers Federation, one of the 2 organisations that created Landcare 35 years ago. Fiona is going to be joined by 2 of my fellow Landcare Australia board directors, each of whom also have fantastic CVs and significant national, international and local roles and influence. Natalie Sommerville, who's on our First Nations Landcare Working Group, is also President of Australian Women in Agriculture and Brendan Foran, Chair of GreenCollar, and with Fiona, a member of the Australian Government's Nature Repair Committee. What three outstanding presenters and speakers that will provide an informed and compelling start to the conference. Enjoy it. I look forward to meeting you over the coming days. Thank you.
Wow. Okay, let's try and get rid of me. There we go. Morning, everyone. Thanks so much, Doug, for the wonderful welcome. And Costa, great to see you again too. It's been quite a while, but it's always good to catch up with people that you don't know and to meet new people as well. And wow, looking out here at the 650, 700 odd people, it is quite phenomenal. And I'm a little bit overawed that this is how my Monday is starting. I'd also like to thank very much Max for his very kind welcome to country, and really enjoyed the story about sugar bag honey. Isn't it great how much you learn when you do connect, when you connect with traditional custodians? And I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians here in the Gold Coast. But also, of course, we all come in this room from right around Australia. Is there anyone from further afield than Australia? No, okay. All around the world. So I certainly want to acknowledge the care that the traditional custodians have placed in our land over many thousands of years. And I also want to acknowledge current custodians as well. I very much enjoyed at the early film clip talking about the connections that traditional custodians and current custodians are making, and how that is improving the way that we look after country, and how that knowledge is building and that mindset is building. And so for me, the more that we can do that, the more that we can actually encourage those sorts of connections and communications, the better off we will be. So today I have the pleasure of not boring you for hours and hours, but to actually be a bit of a scene setter for a conversation that I'm really looking forward to, and that is with Nat and Brendan, who I know are well known to you. But I did want to talk a little bit about the past, the present, and the future, and of course that will then land into hopefully a wonderful conversation that you'll be able to take part in as well. And I think Costa will probably tell you how that's going to happen through the use of the Slido app. So for me, very exciting to be here, welcoming you to the start of this, the start of this amazing conference in essence, and 36 years on. So as Doug said, 36 years ago in 1989, National Farmers Federation, which I was very proud to lead, the Australian Conservation Foundation, and the Hawke government got together and decided on the need and to support the need for Landcare and land restoration. And of course, now here we are, 2025, wanting to keep building on that theme. So how exciting is that? I mean, some would have said a bit of a radical collaboration, but we love radical collaborations. More about that later. So on the screen there, you will see what is a very young-looking version of me. And I didn't slide that in just to see whether I could sneak it through. In actual fact, that was a picture that was taken right back about 20 years ago, there you go, when I started my career in advocacy. And it seems phenomenal. 20 years has gone very quickly, and I'm a bit game. It makes me feel very old saying it. But in actual fact, I think it's important to reflect on the past and to reflect on where we've come from, because if we do that, then we can keep learning and moving forward. So for me, and I want to share some stories this morning about what I do and what I've done to lead into this wonderful conversation. For me, my family have farmed on the Liverpool Plains in New South Wales for nearly 100 years. And the Liverpool Plains is a very, very special area to our family, and also to the many other families and communities that are there in the Liverpool Plains, including the Gomeroi people. Back in 2006, we were all just busily going about our own lives and doing what we did, and Exploration Licence 6505 was granted to allow BHP Billiton the rights to explore for coal across large swathes of the Liverpool Plains. The community were, I think there's no other word than affronted. We were surprised because we didn't think that governments could do that sort of stuff. But we were also absolutely affronted because that was the first that we'd really heard about it. We knew that our landscape was absolutely, had some of the most amazing soils, deep black Chernozem soils in the world. Second to Ukraine, I think, as a matter of fact, they're known to be. We know that the Liverpool Plains has some most amazing environmental features like underground water aquifers that supplied not only the farming communities but also the towns around. Gunnedah, Werris Creek, Corindai, all rely on those aquifer systems. But also we were very surprised because we thought that a process in a nice democratic country like Australia would actually include deep consultation with communities, would actually allow communities the rights and the abilities to actually be part of those consultations. We thought that we'd be able to get in at the beginning of these consultations and affect a change that would help us in our community as we fought for a sustainable future. I remember so vividly some of those days when we started looking into it, and we rang politicians and we rang, departments, and we looked into the process, and it seemed, to be honest, that it was a bit hopeless. Some of the landholders were being told to just pack up and move to the Southern Highlands because that they might have a better chance there of having a longevity in their farming businesses. And it seemed that the more we looked at it, the more one-sided the process was. And we were in an area where we've had large amount of study done of the aquifer systems, of the soils, a lot of science and data, credible stuff that we actually had underpinning our sustainability, sustainable yields, all sorts of different things. We worked together well as a community. But none of that made a difference because we had this steam train of a development approval and this steam train of a big mining company that was then actually joined by Chinese Shenhua a year later, with the government actually paying hundreds of millions of dollars to those companies for those licences. So I think, obviously we had a bit of a vested interest because it was our area. But the thing that really got to me and the thing that started me on my journey was the fact that there was no account taken through the policies at all of the agricultural productivity of the land. There was no account taken of food production or the sustainability of food production. There was no account taken in terms of food security. There wasn't even a place for it in the process. And so I got very, very engaged in that and decided that really I just couldn't sit there and let this happen. And as a community group, we all sat around and looked at each other and worked out what we should do. And I'll talk about a little bit more about that later. But one of the things that I did was to put up my hand to go into council to start with, local government, and then also some of the farmer representative groups, because we thought that really if the farmers didn't have our backs, then who did? And they were lacking in some of these policies around some of these basic things about how are we going to keep preserving the landscape, how are we going to keep some of our water and our food, how are we going to keep sustainable regions if we're just going to dig it all up. So that was how it started. But I have to say now, in 2025, and I think this conference is going to be full of a lot of positivity and wonderful stories and all sorts of great things, but we also have to look at some of the challenges. And I'm a glass half full kind of girl, right? So I think challenges are opportunities as well. But right now, there is absolutely no shortage of wicked issues that we are facing as a community. Okay, so have a think about them. We've got, as Doug said, terrible biodiversity loss, not just throughout Australia, but throughout the world. Climate change, I sit on the Climate Change Authority that has just released its advice to the government. There's a lot of issues, but sometimes I think we look at those issues in a one-eyed way. So biodiversity loss, Headlines when we have conferences, climate change, headlines when we're doing things like NDC. But as well as that, there's a whole lot of other issues as well. And food security, making sure that everyone has access to food is right up there as number 2 of the Sustainable Development Goals, but it just seems to get forgotten. So in 2025, surely we can actually have a better view of how we deal with some of these things. Shouldn't we be dealing with all of these things? We can't deal with them one by one. We need to deal with them all at once. How do we do that? This is the critical thing, because I look at the policy space in 2025 and I don't actually see that it's very, very different to what it was in 2006, in 2006. We talk about the 4 Cs. We talk about climate, COVID, cost of living, all sorts of different things like that. They're the issues that we're dealing with. That's why our supply chain and our global food supply chain is breaking down. But we've got to remember that it's not just in the world that this is happening. In Australia too, the Food Bank, again, I sit on the board of Food Bank these days. The Food Bank Hunger Report last year found that 3.4 million people were food insecure in Australia last year. So whilst biodiversity loss, whilst climate change is incredibly important, so too is how we grow our food, where we grow our food, where are we going to get our food from, and how can we do that sustainably. So for me, unashamedly, I think that farmers are at the core. They're at the core of not just growing your best food in the world or growing the food sustainably, but they're at the core too of some of these other really difficult issues that we're dealing with at the moment. And I firmly believe, if you think about, I'm sure most of you are across the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, there's 17 of them. So you can't pick them off one by one and go, okay, tick, this one, tick, this one, tick, this one. You have to do them all, and you have to have a view to them all, because they're all critical if we're going to have a sustainable future. So for me, it starts with not just farmers, but people who manage our landscapes, people who work with our landscapes, people who look after our landscapes. And as a farmer, I'm very, very focused on the fact that making sure that what we do is sustainable, making sure that we can do it for the long term and the long time, because we absolutely need to. And not only do we need to do it in a way that we can continue to grow food and fibre, but we need to do it in a way that is sustainable for the environment and for the country that depends on us. Back to Karuna. And so we got to a point in Karuna, we'd got the community together, and we decided that in actual fact, it was all very well, us sitting around the table, talking to each other, and we were all vehemently in agreement, okay? We decided, yes, this was really a terrible idea to mine the Liverpool Plains. Yes, we really, really must. But we couldn't work out why we couldn't make any traction. And in our community, even though we did have a number of different groups that were all on the same page, we just didn't work together. We were all working as silos. So what we decided to do in Karuna was to bring everybody together, to start bringing a movement where we actually started to collaborate, where we started to bring other groups together, where we started to acknowledge that there were people in the room who had slightly different issues than ourselves, but that we were all wanting to go to the same place eventually and ultimately. And sometimes that's quite challenging to do. So if you think of people that wouldn't normally get together, for example, farmers with, environmentalists, hello, farmers with, union movement people, farmers with miners, farmers with scientists, all those people we needed to bring in the conversation. But more importantly, we needed to bring the community into the conversation as well, and to keep thinking about what we were talking about and how we were putting forward that information. And we needed to make sure that everyone was on the same page when it came to where we started with the information. And now when I think back about some of the outcomes we had whilst I was at National Farmers Federation in terms of climate change and other tricky policies, that is the critical place to start. You need to start, you can't assume that everyone has the same knowledge. It's absolutely critical that you make sure that you are all starting from the same knowledge base. Because these days with social media and all sorts of other different places that people get their information from, you just cannot assume it any other way. So we brought people together, we collaborated, we communicated, we make sure that we were communicating the same message from the same song sheet with the same basic level of understanding, and we communicated again. You can't over-communicate. And lastly, we corroborated what we were doing, and we made sure that we had the facts and the data to back up our claims. And in the Liverpool Plains, it was about the soil. It was about the productivity. It was about the science. It was about the koalas. It was about the First Nations Gomeroi people that worked with us and had such wonderful history that wasn't being protected under these developments. And we placed our argument together with that data and that facts and that science and then corroborated it, and we were able to move forward and a long time later ultimately win. But it was breaking down those silos, bringing in the media, bringing in the journalists, bringing in the people that were questioning us, bringing in the miners, bringing in the water people, bringing in the scientists to make sure that we could put forward the best information that we possibly could in the most convincing way. And I reckon Australian agriculture is poised to do that again now. We are focused on sustainability, and we have the facts and the data to prove it. And something like the Australian Agricultural Sustainability Framework, for example, we are globally leading in this space. No other country has worked with government to put forward a framework like this that measures 17 indicators in relation to environmental and other sustainability and puts facts and data around it. So when I first started with National Farmers Federation, I used to go overseas and talk to other countries who we were wanting to establish some good trade relationships with. And I'd say, you know, you want Australian produce because Australian produce is clean and green. And I'd put my hand on my heart and everybody'd go, oh, wow, clean and green. Yeah, great. But now you can't do that because they say, what sort of emissions have you got? You know, what about your water? How do you use your water? What about your social concepts and your social governance? How do you manage that in Australia? And that's why we need something like the Australian Agricultural Sustainability Framework to not only prove that we are clean and green, but prove that we are the best industry in the world when it comes to agricultural sustainability. Sometimes you can get sort of carried away with some of the other stuff and the other information that's out there. But for example, climate change, just breaking that down a little bit. Now we are absolutely in absolute need of making sure that we can act in terms of climate change. Because we are exposed, you know, the erratic climates, the changing weather patterns, the heat and the dry, it's a very, very difficult thing for Australian farmers to cope with. But in actual fact, when you look at the data and the stats that back up our climate change in Australia, our agricultural climate change in Australia, when you compare us to the rest of the world, we're pretty bloody good. And yes, we've got a lot further that we need to go. Yes, we're continually learning. Yes, a lot of our technologies, you know, have a look at the sector plan that the Climate Change Authority's just released. Yes, we have a long, long way to go when it comes to knowledge and building on that knowledge and making us even more sustainable. But it's important to know and to be a little bit optimistic about where we are now, because right now we are doing well. And we are a great industry, and we are based on innovation and technology and science. Our R&D institutions have really backed us up well for that, and we've got a good place from which to go. So it's important that whilst the AASF can show up some challenges and some difficulties that we have, it can also show up some great opportunities. So I talked about them already. No science to this, but I firmly believe that whilst we have the 4 C's that are problems, we have 3 C's that are solutions. And I know Doug's already talked about community and cohesion and all sorts of different things. But for me, how do we take where we were, where we are today? So 36 years ago, we formed Landcare. Here we are today. How can we take us to the next level? We have to, first of all, look at radical collaboration. Have a look in the room. Okay, so I'd pretty much bet that everyone here is on the same page when it comes to land care, to sustainability, to environmental outcomes. But how many silos are there in the room right here? How many people do you look around and see that you have no idea who they are, and you might, they could be a conversation just waiting to happen? So break down the silos. Communicate, start from the same. Never assume that everybody starts from the same knowledge base. You just can't. You have to make sure that you are starting from the same place, the same knowledge level, and then you can build knowledge together. That's the only way to build sustainable knowledge. And lastly, corroborate. You have to make sure that you have the facts and data to back up what you say. Otherwise, you're just an empty voice. So you cannot make things up. You have to corroborate everything you say. But we are so lucky in Australia, from an environmental standpoint as well as from an agricultural standpoint, to have lots and lots of facts and data to back us up. And lastly, there is one other element that is critical if we are going to take us to the next level, if we are going to effectively corroborate, communicate, collaborate, and that is trust. So I once served on a board with a fabulous lady called Rachel Botsman, who has written a book called Who Can You Trust? Check it out if you're interested in that sort of stuff, because it's great. She lives in England these days. She said in her book that trust leaps carry us over the chasm of fear, that gap between us and the unknown. Yes, there is a lot of unknown and there's a lot of uncertainty in our future, but let's not get too overcome by that. Let's think about the positivities, let's think about the opportunities, and let's start to trust and build that trust so that we can all work together towards a very sustainable future and nature, agriculture, land and people positive. Thanks so much.
While we put the panel together over there, I'd like to welcome Brendan and Nat to the stage to create our discussion. Welcome. Now, if you have a question, this sort of feels like I'm in between rounds, scan the QR code to submit a question. It's on your table. If you can scan this one, you're doing well. But there's one in the middle of your table, so enjoy the conversation and send in a question and I'll corral them.
Righto, sorry, just as I'm slurping water all over the place and making it spill all over the notes and everything. Great to have you with us, Brendan and Nat. And I might just start with a little statement about Landcare and nature positive with Landcare. So the agricultural and environmental conservation sectors across Australia are acutely aware of the challenges a changing climate presents for sustainable and productive land management. Landcare is in a strong position to lead positive outcomes for nature, agriculture, land, and the people who work to restore and protect it. With a fully mobilised network of Landcare groups and land managers in communities across Australia, Landcare is poised to bring experience and expertise to the emerging nature repair market. Our unique opportunities include working with traditional owners and First Nations organisations, new technology and innovators, and the next generation of farmers and Landcare volunteers. Yeah, well, as board directors, you should know all that already. So, Brendan, I might kick off with you. So I finished with trust, which is one of those weird sort of concepts that seems, everybody says that it's there and that we should have it. But how do you get it? And how well do you think currently the Landcare movement is actually embracing that?
Thank you for the question. Gee whiz, this is a big room. My God, there's a lot of people in this room. Thanks for the question. So when you were speaking, slight segue before I answer it directly. When you were speaking straight after Doug, and I think most of the people in this room get the challenges around things like food security, biodiversity, climate change. And the thing that came through to me as you were speaking right towards the end was, do all the right people know how much trust we're going to have to place in farmers, First Nations people, landowners, land managers and land carers to deliver on the solutions to food security and climate change issues? And right now I think that they don't. I don't think there is enough trust invested in those people out there on the ground. Farmers, First Nations, land managers, landowners, land carers. I don't think there's enough trust invested in those at the moment. Too often we see, and you know this is something I'm quite hot under the collar about right now, is we see really important discussions on those topics which play out on social media and play out in the media, and we have the left and the right yelling at each other, etc. And those people that we trust around food security, climate change, biodiversity, are left sitting there watching the football just go around. And so I think we're going to have to really, really build trust in those people that we need to deliver for the benefit of everyone. Where I have seen trust comes down to my 3 Cs. So a bit like yours is not grounded in any particular empirical data or anything. There's just 3 things that someone else said once and I thought it was fantastic, so now I use it. And it is a community, a connection, and a common language. And Landcare is a community. We have a connection around all Australians caring for land and water. But I think we can always work at the common language piece. And so I was fortunate enough to spend 10 years as CEO of Greening Australia, 5 years as the chair of the Australian Land Conservation Alliance, before coming into the current stack of roles I do now. And one of my favourite experiences when you go out to visit a property, First Nations community, etc., and the Greening Australia staff member or the Australian Land Conservation Alliance staff member comes up to you and they're supposed to tell you about the environmental project they're doing. And what they do is they say, oh, this is Nat, she's a 3rd generation farmer, she's a First Nations woman, and they tell Nat's story. And then when Nat, who being the land holder in that instance, gets to speak, she starts with, I'm not a greenie, but... And then they tell you all the reasons why they actually are a greenie. And so what you see is that high level of trust to tell each other's story. And so that common language piece, I think, comes down to trust that group of stakeholders I said there before to deliver on food security, climate change issues, etc. We have to understand what's also very important to them. And culture is very important and legacy is very important. Sending the kids to a good school is very important. But if we're having these conversations a long, long, long way away from those things, then we're going to struggle with that common language, and therefore we're going to struggle with trust, and we're not going to be able to move forward. I mean, what a community connection and common language that National Farmers Federation, ACF, and Bob Hawke's government must have had back in 1989. They must have been able to put aside those areas where they couldn't establish a common language and focus on the areas that they did have a common language.
Yeah, must have been cool, I reckon, to be in the room back in those days. So Nat, you're a farmer. So do you feel trusted? Do you find it easy to trust?
Thank you, Fiona, and a cracking presentation, I must say. How cool is it to have you as the former president of NFF on the stage here at Landcare? I think this shows that collaboration can exist between Landcare and the ag sector. So I just want to say how bold the leadership is by forming this partnership today between Landcare and NFF this week. And I just saw the media release today, which reads really well and shows a strong sense of collaboration there. So a little bit about me for those who do not know me. I won't assume you all know me because I want to add another C to the list.
Good.
And that is curiosity. Because without curiosity, we just assume that we know how to communicate with each other. And sometimes we don't allow for those other conversations to occur about correction of perspectives, because we all have different perspectives, and that's how silos are created when we don't allow for those different perspectives to be heard. And only then that we feel free to communicate and be heard, that trust is then developed. And this goes across all facets of silos, I guess. And that this is how we get to really strong leadership, is allowing all those voices, big and small, to be heard. And we get really fantastic solutions to these big or small problems. I don't need to tell you this. You guys out there already know this. But I think sometimes when I wear my First Nations lens, because I am a First Nations person, I'm a farmer, I'm a woman, I'm a mum, I'm lots of things, as most of you are as well. I think actually I've got a slightly different perspective on some of the things I've heard. And I wonder if it's helpful me sharing that to transform the way that we do things in every space. So my country, through my dad's lineage, is connected to the islands of Mabiag, Ipi Kigul Puradras, which is the sacred name for our island. And even though I now farm on Nudgeri country, which is in the mid-north of South Australia, I carry my cultural protocols with me on the way I do business and the way I connect with people and the way I learn and show curiosity. And I'm sorry, this is a long way of going around this conversation. I want to, set the baseline here so that you know where I'm coming from when I talk about I'm a farmer or I'm a First Nations person, and how do I link all these things together? So I do grow grain, and I do have sheep and wool, and I do have horticulture and all those other things, which sometimes can be seen as not sustainable. But I like to think that I do sustainably farm and improve the conditions on what I do on the land that I do manage now. And we have a trust system, and that's a financial term now, trust, right? Because we don't own the land. It is something that we are there to protect and to improve on for future generations. And so all these things are interrelated. We all think the same. We may not be connected, we may not see the connection, but they're all interrelated. So when we think about trust, we need to know, or when we talk about trust, we need to know the baseline. Where's everyone coming from before we can contribute and get to that critical solution? And when Fiona, you asked me, do I feel trusted as a farmer? No. Sometimes we do not feel trusted as a farmer. As a First Nations farmer, definitely not. Like, you've got all these different aspects or different perspectives coming at you from all different directions. And I think the important thing here is to find, like you said, Fiona, find that common ground. Because once you find that common ground, then you can leap ahead. I might leave that one there.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Nat. So I just think there's so much in there about how you actually move forward, and your past is always fascinating to me, and your history and your culture and how you marry all of those different things together. But then most people are like that, aren't they? So, we're not just a farmer or an environmentalist. I mean, as you said, so I always say I'm not a scientist, I'm not an environmentalist, I'm a farmer, but in actual fact, I'm all of those things. It's just how you choose to tag yourself. But how does that actually help the conversation or not help the conversation? If you're having conversations about environmental sustainability, a lot of people think you can't talk about productive agriculture. A lot of people think you can't talk about, the way that you use the science or whatever it is. But isn't that all part of it? And where do we start? And I don't mind either of you, but where do we start? Like, who leads the conversation? And should we be sitting back and waiting for policies? Do we need the government? Do we need money? Do we need the communities? Is it all about Landcare? What is it? I mean, who wants to take that one on?
Well, I don't think sitting back and waiting for better leads to better outcomes ever. And I think we've seen a lot of that in the last 15 or 20 years. I think different stakeholders and different people lead at different times. I think what I think is really important to me is policies change, leaders change, contracts end, etc. But the most enduring thing we have in the space that the people in this room care about is the people who live in the regions, the people that are on the land, the people that have got the history, and they've got history ahead of them as well. So whether the example that you gave there before around where your advocacy career started or your advocacy experience started, you're not doing that 20 years later. You know, that campaign has had its moment, but you're still advocating and leading on stuff that's very central to the things we care about 20 years later. So evolution, adaptability, and this is a message to the people in the Landcare community as well, is we need to evolve and adapt, but we always need to lead. Sometimes you lead from the front, sometimes you lead from the middle, and sometimes you lead from the rear, and sometimes you need to lead from everywhere. But it does again come back to all the C's that we've all spoken about. Is we've got to keep remembering baselines, keep remembering, you know, where there's breakages in the common language, you know, where the connection exists. But I always go back to, and people will have heard me talk about this before, what does the world need us to do? What are we doing? Because purpose is absolutely your first line of defence. When something goes wrong, which it will, we come back to what is it we're trying to do here. And if we can't remember why we started, what the world needs us to do and where we're going to get lost. But I don't think that, well, actually I'll tell you something someone said to me shortly after I started at Greening Australia. America is a country founded on enterprise, and the government came second. And let's just say in the post-colonial Australia anyway, the government came first and the economy came second. And so we've got this terrible habit in Australia, and once you hear me say this, you'll think about how many times it gets said. Oh, the government needs to do something about it. And sometimes when community's leading a solution, we stop and break our momentum and bring government to the table. And we almost delegate the responsibility of leading to them. And then we get frustrated that they're not leading it. They don't have a baseline. They don't have the baseline that Nat was talking about there before. They don't have the context. They're not in the kitchen table conversation. So I'm not really giving you one.
Tell us about the kitchen table conversations.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks for the segue. So something that I'm involved in through my role at GreenCollar, I also do a few other things. As well as Landcare, I am involved with an organisation that's going to be here today, Airseed and Grovia, talking about technology in the environment sector. I chair a native seed business, Osterhort, and I'm on the Nature Repair Committee with you. And I'm a little bit frustrated that, particularly around the role of markets, which have been a solution to, and agriculture's in markets, and particularly around food security, climate change, etc., is we've got 40 years, 36 years in the case of Landcare, 36 years of all these wonderful proof of concepts, but effectively a whole lot of subscale, approaches to global issues. And so we've got a market in Australia and we're trying to bring these environmental markets forward, but instead of going to farming and First Nations people, the people that are actually on the land, practitioners, and having a direct conversation with them around how are we going to fix the things that are broken in this system, how are we going to make it better, and how are we going to make sure that all this finance and all this capital that's out there is actually going into the dual challenges of food security and climate change. Instead of that being the primary conversation with landholders, we're trawling through, obscure reports that academics, no offence to academics, by the way, but
Probably a few in the room.
obscure reports written in, thousands and thousands of kilometres away from a farm, and we're making that the conversation. That is not the right conversation for us to be having. It is a part of the conversation, but the right conversation is, how are we going to engage First Nations, farming communities, landholders and land managers in making the solutions better and at scale? That's what I think we should be talking about. And so I'm leading a process at the moment with a few fellow travellers to take the conversation around one that's largely playing out on social media and take it into kitchen tables, rural communities and around the yarning circle, and make sure that they're the conversations that are leading how these markets develop and evolve and address those twin issues.
Yeah. So as Brendan said, he and I sit on the Nature Repair Committee together, which of course is starting hopefully starting to get a biodiversity market going here in Australia, which will give us a lot more options when it comes to providing support funding for some of the essential environmental works that are carried out on farm, well, in the landscape. But I think it's, I still get really frustrated that it's quite hard to marry growing food and growing environment in a policy sense. Nat, I know farmers generally love to hate regulations, and so what role do you reckon government has when it comes to those sorts of things?
Yeah, I think it's more than just farmers hating regulation. I think everybody hates the red tape out there. It's necessary, of course, to some degree, but what we need to do is make sure that the red tape is not minimising the way we progress. We need to find the optimum or the sweet spot, because if we don't, we're just going to frustrate people out there, and that's what we are. We're like, if landholders are the solution here, what I've been hearing, I'm going to be a bit of an antagoniser here in this conversation, because I want to share the other perspective. If landholders are the solution here to transform our landscapes and improve biodiversity loss, and also the temperature, goodness me, I was at the National Drought Forum a couple of weeks ago, or may have been last week now, and we're hearing a lot about temperature rising, and that's the new norm now. So we're already at the boiling point here. That this is what we're dealing with. This is the new norm. So all these things keep happening in a short space of time. But how do we fill that gap really, really, the gap that you talked about? How do we bridge that gap really quickly so we don't do more damage than we already have? But then how do we get these over 50% of these land managers to get on board the train and help when they can? So this is the challenging conversation that I'm sure you're having at the kitchen table, Brendan, and I just want to maybe put another perspective in there about when you're doing things tough, like us, we are in drought here in South Australia or Southern Australia. The last thing you want to be thinking about is planting more trees, worrying about erosion, all of those things as it happens. So how do we make sure that we are responsive before these things happen? And I guess that's where the National Drought Plan comes into play. But
do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, the National Drought Plan, and I don't have authority to talk about it. Maybe, Brendan, you might want to go in there. But what I do want to say, as a reflection of the conversations we had at the National Drought Forum, was that we did have a lot of people in the room to provide their input into that, from CWA to local mayors to, of course, your NFF was leading it with DAF, and that's, Department of Ag, Fisheries and Forestry. A wide breadth of people, siloed conversations. So we've got a heap of sticky notes that still need to be digested yet, and then informed and communicated back to the group. But I think that the table that I was sitting at, we decided that if everyone had landholders, that is, whether you're a farmer or a First Nations corporation or whatever it is, had a plan to deal with these tough times before it happens, then it makes things much easier. It's like having a biosecurity plan. Have your plan before we get the Capra beetle hit the ground, etc., and the nappies. So that was it. But it's got to be engaging. A plan sounds so boring, doesn't it? This is the communication piece. This is the engagement piece. How do we make this stuff stick? How do we get the people, this is a people thing, to do and put into practice and have that practice change. So there's lots of ideas out there on how to improve. At the end of the day, when people hear red tape or see red tape, it halts us up to progress. And so that's the thing that we need to cut through, the red tape and solutions moving forward. And that comes with really good leadership, really good facilitation, and making sure everybody's heard.
Yeah. And look, we're just going to we're still having a good conversation up here, but we'd love you to be part of it as well. And Costa, anytime you like, if you've got a few questions coming through, just wave your hands wildly or interrupt, and because we'll talk till the cows come home, but we're very happy to take people's questions and discuss those as well.
Okay, so thanks everyone for sending in questions. They're getting collated here, but we'll go quick fire on these so that we can get through a few. So the first one, it's a bit of a continuation of what we're talking about, but give us something each on how do we break down the silos in government. Trust is missing and it's becoming a barrier to action and investment.
I didn't want to go first on that one. How do we break down? So in its short form, Costa, the question is, sorry, can you say that again?
How do we break down the silos in government because trust is missing and it's becoming a barrier to action?
Okay, so again, I'm going to give quite a general answer to that. I think it is about going back to my principles of community connection and common language and focusing as much of the conversation in on what's the problem we're trying to solve here. We ask a lot of government. I've, in the last 24 months, been involved in 2 government roles, one with the state-based CMAs in Victoria and then the federal government. And I garnered a completely new appreciation for the way government works and how organised they are, how well planned they are most of the time. But I also started to realise the pressures that they work on because everyone is expecting absolute perfection on everything from government. So the best way I can answer that is I think our whole system can do better. Don't be confused by that. But I think we've got to bring it back to when we're having a conversation with government, we focus on the things that are most important, that's in the best interest of Landcare, given this group here today, and the best interest of the community, and try and keep the things that are a distraction from that away from the table.
Yeah, I'm going to go to your connection point. So a number of the roles I do now, Climate Change Authority, Nature Repair Committee, the New South Wales Biodiversity Conservation Trust, I bring, and I'm on those committees because of the agricultural lens that I bring to those conversations. And sometimes I'm amazed by some of the work that comes out from government where the people don't seem to have much knowledge about what is actually happening on the ground. But, and these days it's really, really easy to jump to the angry eyeballs thing. You go, oh my God, what are they saying? What are they doing, these people? Don't they know anything? But in actual fact, it's just that they haven't been necessarily exposed to some of the things that I have. And I can learn from them as well. So for me, it is about making sure that where you can look for places where you make a difference, okay? So one of the things that inspired me when I first started my career was don't ask what the world needs from you, ask what makes you come alive and go and do it, because that's what the world needs. Now, that is absolutely what drives me now. And I have the ability to go into some of these rooms to be able to put forward the facts and the data that I was talking about before, to be able to connect some of the government people who are doing their jobs, who are trying to do the best that they possibly can, to connect them up with people who do have the facts and the data if I don't. And that way, then Costa, I reckon, then government actually gets even though they're all working from different departments which are naturally siloed, they get the overall picture and they get the vibe. And that's why, I'm really proud of some of the work that we're putting out now. It's not perfect, but some of the work we're putting out through Nature Repair, some of the work we're putting out through the Climate Change Authority, which does actually start to look at some of these issues, starts to look at how we can make a difference by working together instead. So I'm going to say, put your hand up, have a think about where you can make a difference, have a think about what your passion is and what your skills are. And there will be a place where not only you can be pivotal in this room, but you can also be pivotal in government. What about you, Nat?
I'm going to just quickly add that people like Fiona, people like a lot of people in this room who are part of advisory groups for the government to inform government on how to go, get in contact with them. If you don't have the time, to fill those positions yourself, call up those people, have a yarn with them, and give them your input, because that's what is required here. And then always invite, work with the government, invite, government to come out and see what you're doing. So you've got that interaction and that collaboration happening.
Not very rapid fire, sorry, Costa.
No, that's all right. Well, in a similar vein to this, but I think this is appropriate. It's a really appropriate question. If a young person in the audience today decided to follow your respective paths, what advice would you give them?
I'll start that one. Okay, so don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go and do it. So people talk a lot about leadership these days. They talk a lot about authenticity and being authentic. If you find what you are passionate about and what drives you, then you don't have to worry about any of that stuff, because that is who you are. I can hand on heart say that I have never had to, lobby or push for any position that I wasn't passionate about, because I found what drove me, and I've been able to find positions and been able to put forward spaces where I can make a difference. So if you're a young person, make sure you try and get as broad a knowledge as you possibly can, and don't jump to conclusions. But at the end of the day, you have to find what drives you and what you're passionate about and where you can make a difference and what your skill sets are and where your gaps are. And you have to be open to the idea that other people can help you do that as well. And so in World Farmers at the moment, some of the strongest arguments we put forward from World Farmers are from farmers in Africa, and from farmers in Northern America and other places as well, where they are also dealing with some of these issues that we are. So that's my 10 cents worth. Nat?
I might get the next one. Over to you, Brett.
Okay, I had two things to add to that. I'm 51 and people still ask me, how did I work out what I wanted to do when I grow up? And I say, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, but I've worked out what I don't want to do. So I focus more on what I don't want to do. And the second thing is, and this was quite a late thing for me, understand what your learning style is I found, and this is, anyone that knows me knows I talk a lot, but I also talk a lot with people, because that's the way I learn. When people are talking to me, I'm just taking everything in and going, they're so smart. How do they know that? How did you work that out, etc.? So that's that curiosity thing. I never ever think, and I never think I'm the smartest person in the room, because I'm genuinely not. But when you speak to everyone, they're always telling you stuff. And particularly when you're in these roles, people are always telling you stuff that's great information. So work out what you don't want to do and find out what your learning style is.
Yeah, and I'll just add then quickly, understand your values set and follow your values, because that will lead to your sustainable path, I guess, because that's ultimately what gives you your purpose in life. So, and work, or both.
Well, this session was brought to you by the letter C. It was a conversation, and my name is Costa, and I have to close this conversation, but I've collected many letters C, and I just want to wrap this wonderful session by sharing collaboration, communication, corroboration, culture, community, connection, common language, and I think ultimately the reason we are all here at this conference is because of commitment, which wasn't on there, but it is now. But the one I was going to throw in just to finish was curiosity. Yeah. So take that curiosity out to morning tea and have a coffee. And can you please thank our keynote speaker, Fiona Simson, Natalie Sommerville, and Brendan Foran. Enjoy morning tea, and we'll see you back here after the break.